The crystal chandelier overhead seemed to mock Alara with its 1,000 glittering eyes. Each facet reflected a world she did not belong to, a world of effortless smiles, champagne flutes held with careless grace, and conversations that hummed with the easy energy of wealth. She, on the other hand, felt the grit of desperation under her fingernails and the gnawing ache of an empty stomach. The starched collar of her catering uniform chafed against her neck, a constant reminder of her role as an invisible cog in this opulent machine. Her thoughts were not here, amidst the murmur of stock options and summer homes in the Hamptons. They were in a cramped, third-floor walk-up apartment where the radiator clanked a mournful rhythm. They were with her son, Leo, whose small body was hot with a fever she could not afford to treat. The last of the infant Tylenol was gone, and the eviction notice on her kitchen table felt like a physical weight pressing down on her chest. Her bank account was a cruel joke, a landscape of negative numbers. More champagne on table 7. Her manager, a man with a perpetually sour expression, hissed as he passed. Alara nodded, her throat tight. She gripped the heavy silver tray, the muscles in her arm trembling not from the weight of the glasses, but from sheer exhaustion. She had not eaten a real meal in 2 days, prioritizing the last of the baby formula for Leo. The dizziness that had been her constant companion was intensifying, making the glittering room sway. She navigated the crowded floor, her movements stiff and clumsy. A wave of lightheadedness washed over her, and the floor seemed to tilt violently. Her ankle twisted. The tray lurched. Gasps erupted around her as glasses clinked and slid. With a desperate lurch, she reached out, her hand closing around the first solid thing it found, the sleeve of a man's impeccably tailored tuxedo. She clung to him, the tray clattering to the floor at their feet, champagne splashing across polished Italian leather shoes. The room fell into a pocket of shocked silence. Mortification, hot and sharp, pierced through her dizzy haze. She had just made a scene at the most exclusive corporate gala of the year. Her job, the last fragile thread holding her life together, was gone. "I am so sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking. She did not dare to look up, keeping her eyes fixed on the ruined shoes. I'll clean it up. I'm so sorry." A low, calm voice answered, devoid of the anger she expected. "It's all right. Are you hurt?" She finally forced her gaze upward, past a crisp white shirt and a black silk bow tie, to a face that was all sharp angles and quiet intensity. His eyes, a deep, startling gray, were not looking at the mess on the floor, but at her. They held a strange, assessing quality, as if he were seeing more than just a clumsy waitress. He was Damian Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Industries, the architect of this entire empire, though Alara had no idea. To her, he was just an anchor in a swirling storm of her own making. "No, I'm fine," she lied, pulling her hand away from his sleeve as if burned. "Please, I am so sorry." Her manager was there in an instant, his face purple with rage. "You're finished," he snarled, grabbing her arm. "Get out. You are fired." "That won't be necessary," Damian Blackwood said, his voice dropping a full octave. It was not loud, but it cut through the air with an authority that made the manager freeze, his hand dropping from Alara's arm. Damian's gaze remained on Alara. He saw the faint tremor in her hands, the bruised exhaustion beneath her eyes, the fierce, cornered pride in the set of her jaw. He saw a resilience that reminded him of someone else, from a lifetime ago. "In fact," Damian continued, his focus absolute, "I believe I have a position for her at my company." The silence that followed was more profound than before. Alara stared at him, convinced the hunger had finally made her hallucinate. This man, a stranger she had just drenched in champagne, was offering her a job? It made no sense. People like him did not interact with people like her, except to dismiss them. "Sir?" she stammered, confusion warring with the humiliation. I don't understand. My office. Monday morning. 9 o'clock, he said, ignoring her confusion. He turned to his assistant, a severe-looking woman who had appeared at his elbow. "Eleanor, get her details, and arrange for a car to take her home." He gave Alara one last, unreadable look before turning his attention back to the party guest he had been speaking with, the entire incident dismissed as if it were nothing more than a minor interruption. The crowd's murmur resumed, but now it was laced with whispers about the baffling interaction. Alara stood frozen, her world tilted on a new, incomprehensible axis. Her manager stared, his mouth agape. The offer was absurd, a fantasy. But as Damien's assistant gently guided her away from the mess, a single, desperate thought took root in her mind. What if it was real? The next day was a blur of anxiety. Alara expected it all to be a mistake, a rich man's fleeting whim. But that afternoon, a sleek black car pulled up to her dilapidated apartment building. A courier delivered a thick envelope containing a formal employment contract for a position as a junior designer at Blackwood Industries, a role that perfectly matched the degree she had earned before Leo was born, a degree she thought she would never use. The salary was more money than she had ever seen in her life. Tucked inside was a cashier's check for a signing bonus, an advance large enough to pay for Leo's medicine, cover 3 months of rent, and fill her empty refrigerator. She stared at the check, her hands shaking. This was not kindness, it was a transaction, and she had no idea what she was being asked to sell. Pride warred with the image of Leo's feverish face. Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. With a heavy heart filled with equal parts relief and suspicion, she signed the contract. Her first day at Blackwood Industries felt like stepping onto another planet. The lobby was a cathedral of glass and steel, soaring 50 stories into the sky. Employees moved with a quiet, purposeful energy, their clothes crisp, their faces confident. Alara, in her best second-hand blazer, felt like an imposter. She was shown to a sleek, minimalist cubicle with a brand-new computer and a stunning view of the city. The work was challenging but invigorating. For the first time in years, she felt a spark of her old self, the ambitious, creative woman she had been before her life had narrowed to a single point of survival. Yet, the suspicion lingered, a cold knot in her stomach. Damien Blackwood was an enigma. He was rarely seen on her floor, a near-mythical figure who existed behind the closed doors of the executive suite. But she felt his influence everywhere. A human resources representative called her to a private meeting to discuss the company's premier childcare benefits, which were now fully at her disposal. Her supervisor assigned her to a high-profile project, an opportunity rarely given to a new hire. It was too much. The generosity was too specific, too overwhelming. It felt less like a job and more like a curated rescue mission, and she did not understand the motive. People like Damien Blackwood did not do things without a reason, and his reason remained shrouded in mystery. Weeks turned into a month. Leo was healthy and thriving in the excellent daycare. They had moved into a new, safe apartment in a better neighborhood. Alara was excelling at her job, her designs catching the eye of senior management. On the surface, her life was perfect. But the feeling of being a pawn in a game she did not understand was eating away at her. The breaking point came when she received an email informing her that an anonymous donor had established a full college trust fund for Leo. It was him. It had to be him. The scale of it was terrifying. This went far beyond a simple act of charity. She stormed past his executive assistant, ignoring the woman's startled protests, and burst into Damien Blackwood's office. He was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, his back to her, looking out at the city that lay at his feet. "Why?" she demanded, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and fear. "The job, the daycare, the apartment, and now a trust fund? What do you want from me?" Damien turned slowly. His face was unreadable, his gray eyes calm. "I want nothing from you, Alara. I don't believe you," she shot back, taking a step closer. "No one does this. No one gives a complete stranger a new life for no reason. Are you trying to buy me? Is this some kind of sick game? You have to tell me what this is really about." He remained silent for a long moment, his gaze searching her face. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken words. Alara's heart pounded against her ribs, her accusations hanging in the air between them. From his limited perspective, Damien saw not an employee but a reflection. He saw the same fierce, protective fire that had burned in his wife's eyes. He had not intended for things to escalate this way. The initial job offer had been an impulse, a knee-jerk reaction to seeing a struggling mother. But then he had learned her son's name was Leo. The coincidence was a knife to the heart, reopening a wound he thought had long since scarred over. His own son, his Leo, would have been about the same age. Helping her son felt like a penance, a way to channel the helpless grief that still ambushed him in the quiet hours of the night. He had kept his distance, orchestrating her comfort from afar, trying to give her the security his own family had lost. But he had miscalculated. He had not accounted for her pride, her sharp intelligence that would refuse to accept such a simple fairy tale. Now, confronted with her raw, desperate demand for truth, he knew the distance was no longer sustainable. "You're right," he said finally, his voice soft and laced with a deep, old pain. "It's not about you. Not entirely." He walked over to his desk and picked up a small, silver frame that had been facing away from the door. He turned it and held it out for her to see. It was a picture of him, younger and smiling, with a woman who looked at him with pure adoration. Cradled between them was a baby boy, wrapped in a blue blanket. "That was my wife, Amelia," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And our son." Alara stared at the photo, her anger deflating, replaced by a wave of confusion. "We lost them both," Damien continued, his gaze distant, fixed on a memory she could not see. "A car accident, 5 years ago. My son, his name was Leo." The name hit her like a physical blow. She staggered back a step, her hand flying to her mouth. The pieces clicked into place, forming a picture not of manipulation, but of profound, gut-wrenching grief. All his actions, all the disproportionate kindness, were suddenly cast in a new, tragic light. "When I saw you at that gala," he went on, his voice barely a whisper, "I saw how fiercely you were fighting for your son. It was the same fight I saw in Amelia. When I later found out your son's name, it felt like, I don't know, a sign, a chance to do something, to provide the safety and security I failed to give my own family." He looked at her then, and for the first time, she saw past the billionaire CEO. She saw a man hollowed out by loss, a man trying to mend an irreparable hole in his own soul by patching up hers. The stoic mask was gone, replaced by a vulnerability that was utterly disarming. "I'm sorry," he said, the words heavy with sincerity. "I never meant to frighten you or make you feel indebted. I was just trying to honor his memory. It was selfish." Tears welled in Alara's eyes, tears of empathy for his unimaginable pain. Her suspicion dissolved, washed away by a current of understanding. She had misjudged him completely. He was not a predator. He was a fellow survivor, scarred by life in a different, but no less profound, way. "Don't be sorry," she whispered, her own voice thick. "Thank you." That confession changed everything. The invisible wall between them crumbled, and the foundation of a fragile trust began to form. Their interactions became less formal. Damien would ask about Leo, his questions filled with a genuine, almost wistful interest. Alara, in turn, found herself looking for him, her day feeling incomplete if she did not catch a glimpse of him. A quiet, tentative friendship bloomed in the sterile corporate environment, a bond forged in shared vulnerability. But as their personal connection deepened, a shadow was lengthening in the corridors of Blackwood Industries. Marcus Thorne, a senior board member and Damien's longtime rival, had watched the CEO's sudden interest in the new junior designer with a calculating eye. Marcus had been siphoning money from the company for years, covering his tracks with a labyrinth of false accounts. With Damien distracted and emotionally invested, he saw the perfect opportunity to make his final, decisive move. His plan was as ruthless as it was brilliant. He would not just ruin Damien. He would use the very person Damien sought to protect as the instrument of his downfall. It began subtly. Marcus started assigning Alara small, seemingly unimportant tasks, routing documents through her that required her digital signature. She, eager to prove her worth, completed them diligently, unaware that she was leaving a digital trail, her name becoming attached to falsified invoices and fraudulent transaction reports. The threat materialized on a Tuesday afternoon. 2 stern-faced detectives and a forensic accountant walked into the office and headed straight for the executive suite. An hour later, they emerged, escorting a grim-faced Damien. At the same time, the head of security approached Alara's desk. "Miss Vance, we need to confiscate your computer," he said, his tone apologetic but firm. "You need to come with us." Panic seized her. In a glass-walled conference room, the detectives laid it all out. They accused Damien of masterminding a massive embezzlement scheme. And, they informed her, Her digital signature was on dozens of the key documents. They presented her as his accomplice. The world tilted again, just as it had at the gala, but this time it was not from hunger. It was from sheer terror. They were painting her as a criminal, using her gratitude and her job as evidence against her. Her new life, the safety she had just begun to believe in, was about to be ripped away. She thought of Leo. The fear was suffocating. Damien, released on bail but barred from his own company, called her that night. His voice was steady, a rock in her sea of panic. "I didn't do it, Alara," he said simply. "And I know you didn't either. This is Marcus Thorne. He's framing us." "But they have evidence," she cried, her voice breaking. "My name is all over it. They think you hired me to be your accomplice. He's using you to get to me." Damien's voice was cold with fury. "He underestimated you. He underestimated us. I need you to think, Alara. Did anything seem strange about the documents Marcus gave you? Anything at all?" Alara squeezed her eyes shut, forcing herself to push past the panic and think. Her mind raced back over the past few weeks. The files, they were always delivered on a specific encrypted drive. Marcus had been insistent she use only that drive. And there was something else, a tiny detail a designer would notice. "The company logo," she said, her voice trembling with a dawning realization. "On the letterheads of the documents he gave me. The kerning is off. The space between the W and the O in Blackwood. It's a fraction of a millimeter too wide. Our official brand guide is incredibly strict about that. I only noticed it because I was the one who helped revise the guide last month." There was a sharp intake of breath on Damien's end. "It's a forgery," he said, a new energy in his voice. "He must have recreated the template and made a mistake. A tiny one, but a mistake nonetheless. Can you prove it?" "I think so," she said, her mind already working. "The metadata on a file can be faked, but the source code of the vector logo file can't. If he used a counterfeit asset, I can find it." That night, they became a team. Barred from the office, Alara worked from her home laptop, while Damien guided her through the company's complex server architecture over the phone. Fueled by coffee and adrenaline, she delved into the digital labyrinth. For hours, she traced data packets and cross-referenced file creation dates. Finally, in the deep archives of the server, she found it. The original upload of the flawed logo file, sourced not from the official marketing server, but from an external IP address. An IP address that, with Damien's resources, was quickly traced back to a shell corporation owned by Marcus Thorne. They had him. The emergency board meeting was a storm of tension. Marcus Thorne sat at the head of the table, arrogant and confident, presenting his manufactured evidence against Damien. Damien, calm and composed, waited for him to finish. "Your evidence is compelling, Marcus," Damien said when Thorne was done. "But it is also a complete fabrication." He projected Alara's findings onto the large screen at the front of the room. He showed them the two logos, side by side. To the untrained eye, they were identical. But then, he zoomed in, showing the minute flaw in the kerning. He presented the server logs, the IP trace, the undeniable digital proof that Marcus had created and planted every single piece of incriminating evidence. The color drained from Marcus Thorne's face. His blustering denials fell flat against the cold, hard data. Security was called. As he was being escorted from the room, his empire of deceit crumbling around him, his eyes met Alara's. She stood beside Damien, no longer a victim, but the architect of his downfall. She met his hateful glare with a look of quiet, unyielding strength. In the aftermath, the chaos subsided, replaced by a profound sense of relief. The charges were dropped. Damien was reinstated. But the victory felt secondary to something far more important that had been forged in the crisis. That evening, Damien found Alara in her office. She was packing her things, an uncertain look on her face. "You don't have to do that," he said softly from the doorway. "I know," she replied, not looking at him. "But after all this, I feel like I'm a liability here." He crossed the room in 3 long strides, gently taking her hands in his. "You are the furthest thing from a liability, Alara. You saved my company. You saved me." He looked at her, and the gratitude in his eyes was mingled with something deeper, something more powerful. The professional lines between them had blurred and then vanished completely during their shared ordeal. "When I thought I was going to lose everything," he confessed, his voice low and earnest. "The only thing I was truly afraid of was losing you. Not as an employee, not as a friend." He cupped her face, his thumb gently stroking her cheek. "My past will always be a part of me. The grief for my wife and son, it doesn't just disappear. But I thought it had closed me off from ever feeling anything again. I was wrong. You and Leo, you didn't just give me a cause. You brought me back to life. You are my future, Alara, if you'll have me." Tears streamed down Alara's face, but for the first time in a very long time, they were tears of pure, unadulterated joy. She had come to this company seeking survival, and instead, she had found a home. She had met a man she thought was a benevolent stranger, only to discover a partner whose broken pieces seemed to fit perfectly with her own. "Yes," she whispered, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. "Yes." He leaned in and kissed her, a kiss that was not about gratitude or relief, but about promise. It was the closing of a painful chapter and the beginning of a beautiful new one. 1 year later, the grand ballroom was once again ablaze with light from the crystal chandeliers. But this time, Alara was not wearing a scratchy catering uniform. She wore a stunning sapphire gown that matched the confident light in her eyes. She stood beside Damien, her hand resting comfortably in his, no longer an outsider, but the co-host of the annual Blackwood Industries Charity Gala. She was now the head of the creative department, her talent finally given the platform it deserved. She was a respected leader, an innovator, and a partner. From across the room, she could see Leo, now a happy, chattering toddler, being doted on by his loving nanny, completely at home in this glittering world. Damien squeezed her hand, pulling her from her reverie. He led her out onto a quiet balcony overlooking the sprawling city lights. "A year ago, on this night, in this very spot, I was a ghost," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "And you were fighting for your life. It's funny how the worst moment of your life can turn out to be the beginning of it." Alara smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I stumbled," she recalled softly. "I was falling, and I just grabbed onto the first person I could find. And you never let go," he murmured, turning to face her. The city lights danced in his eyes, but they were no match for the adoration she saw there. He dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. He opened it to reveal a simple, elegant diamond ring that shone with the promise of a lifetime. "Alara Vance," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You grabbed onto a stranger and saved his life. Will you make our little family official? Will you marry me?" Her breath hitched, and a joyous laugh escaped her lips. The answer was already in her heart, a resounding, definite, and eternal yes. She looked from the ring to the face of the man she loved, to the bright future that stretched out before them, a future born from a moment of desperation and a stranger's impossible kindness. She had held on for dear life, and in doing so, had found everything she had ever wanted.